November's gray touch had settled over the city. Cold wind weaved through the skyscrapers, making the streetlights flicker as if whispering secrets. Wet leaves stuck to the sidewalks. People moved in a hurry, barely making eye contact. Time, it seemed, was something no one could afford. But in the middle of all that noise and rush, stood a man who looked as though time had forgotten him. Steve Rogers. No longer the star-spangled icon, Steve had blended into the crowd. A retired soldier, modestly dressed. His coat collar turned up, a plain cap pulled low over his eyes. A warm coffee cup rested in his gloved hand. He watched the world pass by, silently fighting the war that never quite ended. He sat at a small corner cafe. From a nearby table came soft laughter, and a street saxophonist played a slow blues tune at the corner. Everything felt ordinary, until a calm but firm voice broke through the background noise. "Steve Rogers?" Steve turned his head slowly. A man in his 30s stood there, sharp eyes, leather jacket worn thin by time, mud-specked shoes. His stance spoke of resolve, but his eyes, they carried the weight of another era. "You don't remember me, do you?" the man asked. Eli Johnson." Steve's grip tightened slightly. He did remember. Not just the name, but that day. Back in 2012, during the Battle of New York, Eli took a seat across from him. Silence hung in the air for a few seconds. Then he spoke. "I was 10, with my mom. We were downtown when it happened. Buildings collapsed, screaming everywhere. I was trapped. She was trapped. And you looked at me. I remember that moment. Then you turned and saved another kid." Steve's chest tightened. He remembered the impossible decision. 2 lives, 1 choice. The kind of moment that visits you in your sleep. "She didn't make it," Eli said, his voice almost a whisper. "I learned not to believe in heroes that day." Steve kept his hands locked together, struggling to speak. Finally, his voice came low, but steady. "That day, I've replayed it 1,000 times. The lives I saved don't silence the ones I couldn't. The war may be over, but I still carry the silence of every life I didn't reach." Eli's eyes shimmered. Anger melted into something else, grief maybe, or understanding. "I blamed you," he admitted, "because there was no one else to blame." Steve reached into his wallet and slowly pulled out a worn photo. Dusty and torn at the edges, it was taken during the aftermath of the attack. A small boy covered in ashen tears was captured mid-cry. "I kept this," Steve said, gently sliding the photo across the table, "because you lived. And that mattered more than you'll ever know." More silence. The sound of an ambulance passed somewhere in the distance. The city darkened around them. "I rebuilt my life without heroes," Eli said, "but I became one in my own way. I'm an EMT now." Steve looked up, genuinely surprised. Eli continued, "I save who I can, and for the ones I can't, I carry them too." Steve smiled faintly, his eyes damp. "Then you've done what I always hoped I could, made something good out of pain." They didn't need a dramatic embrace or tears. Their handshake said everything. A soldier's grip, a survivor's strength. No one in that cafe knew what that conversation meant. But perhaps, in that small corner of the city, true heroism had shown its face, not in battle, not in glory, but in healing. Steve Rogers stood, finishing his coffee, lighter than when he arrived. As he walked into the night, the words Eli had said lingered. "I may have blamed you once, but today, I thank you for letting me live long enough to understand." If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful and emotional moments from unexpected heroes. Let's keep these stories alive, because sometimes the quietest voices leave the deepest impact.